Happy Chinese New Year, the year of the ox, and welcome to the 5 New Year's Wellness Challenge with your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi. We are celebrating the Chinese New Year with the 5 elements of acupuncture: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Sarah Alemi of Eastern Roots Wellness, and welcome to day 5 of our 5-day wellness challenge. So congratulations. Today is the finish line. For all of you who have been following along and tuning in with me, you made it. We're finally covering our 5 elements. So for you today, we're going to start talking about the earth element, and we're going to start easing into it by talking about the role that food plays during the Chinese New Year. And as you're going to learn shortly, food and digestion has a lot to do with tonight's element, the earth element. So yeah, let's talk about the role of food during the Chinese New Year. As some of you know who tuned in on Friday or any of the other nights, the Chinese New Year is a 15-plus day festival. It's still going on. So I always thought that it would be fun to incorporate a little tidbit for you before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty. So during the Chinese New Year, certain dishes are eaten, and they're eaten for their symbolic meaning. There's what's called lucky foods that's served during this time of the Chinese New Year, especially during the Chinese New Year Eve and then New Year Day. And they're believed to bring good luck in different ways for the coming year. So the auspicious symbolism of these traditional Chinese New Year foods is based not only on their appearance or what they are, but also on the pronunciation and what they sound like. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So it's not only the dishes themselves that matter, but it's also the preparation and the ways that they are served. So some of the most common Chinese New Year foods that are eaten are fish, dumplings, spring rolls. We have the sweet rice balls, and we also have the fruit. We have rice cake and the longevity noodles. So one of the first most common foods that are eaten on the Chinese New Year is that of fish. Fish is thought to bring about an increase in prosperity. In Chinese, fish, it sounds like surplus. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it does sound like the word surplus. So plentiful, more than is needed. So it's a traditional Chinese New Year dish that's often on the dinner menu for New Year's Eve. And people like to have a surplus right at the end of the year because they think if they manage to save a certain amount this year, that they can save even more for the next year. And depending on what fish you eat is also just as important as the fish yourself. For example, catfish in Chinese sounds like the meaning for a year surplus. So again, the fish is all about surplus, having more than you need so that the next year you'll have even more. Also, there's different meanings between eating one fish or 2 fish. It's thought that if you eat 2 fish, one on New Year's Eve and then one on New Year's Day, so this past Friday and Saturday, again, it sounds like you'll have a surplus year after year. Whereas if you eat only 1 fish, like such a catfish, you eat the upper part on New Year's Eve and then you eat the lower part the next day. And it's like the same kind of homophonic meaning, or the way that it sounds in Chinese and how it relates to another word in terms of finances. And then how you eat it matters a lot too. It's said that when you serve the fish, when you have guests around, because again, a lot of family and friends will come over and visit with you during the Chinese New Year, that you should put the head of the fish or position the head of the fish to the most distinguished guests are the elders, showing respect. It's only after they've eaten that others can eat the rest of the fish. The fish shouldn't be moved either. The two people who face the head and the tail of the fish, so across from each other, they're supposed to drink or take a drink at the same time. This is also considered to have a lucky meaning. So we have the fish. Again, there's different kinds of fish you can have depending on what kind of prosperity or surplus you want. But it's really for having and being able to save lots of money for the coming year. Next up, we have dumplings, and this is wealth as well. And this might be something that some of you are familiar with, the Chinese dumplings. It's widely popular, especially in North China. So what's interesting is that Chinese dumplings can be made to look like Chinese silver ingots, which are not bars, but boat-shaped, oval, and turned up at the two ends, so like kind of the traditional shape. And this is like a type of money, right? So they can actually be made to look like a type of money, hence their representation for wealth. And there's certain traditions that people will do. Sometimes we'll put certain things like a white string in the dumpling. And it's said that if you're the person who eats a dumpling with this white string or thread, that not only will you have wealth in the new year, but you will have, or you will possess a long life as well. And sometimes people will even put in a copper coin, and then the one who eats it, coin, wealth, will become wealthy, that sort of thing. So I think sometimes in the U.S. we have some of these traditions. For example, I think this past Tuesday was Fat Tuesday, and we have that special Mardi Gras cake, right, with the baby in it, same sort of thing. Next, we have spring rolls. Again, they symbolize wealth for the new year. They're traditionally in China eaten during the Spring Festival, and these are especially popular dish in East China. So again, many of you know that these are cylinder-shaped rolls. Are filled with vegetables, meat, and something sweet. And some of the lucky sayings is a ton of gold, and this is because spring rolls sometimes look like a gold bar, hence them representing wealth. Then we have, I'm jumping down to the glutinous rice cake. I'm not sure how I like that translation, but the rice cake is thought to mean a higher income or position for the coming year. And it's eaten because in Chinese, glutinous rice cake sounds like it means getting higher year on by year. So getting higher, so think of moving up in the workplace, moving up in your place of employment. And obviously, the more you move up, the more prosperous you become. Some other things that are typically eaten during the Chinese New Year include the sweet rice balls. And this is actually about something different than wealth. It's about family togetherness, which actually has to do with tonight's earth element as well, and the support and the family that comes with the earth element. But back to the rice balls. So this is China's main food for their Lantern Festival, which is the last day of the Chinese New Year, which is coming up in a couple days. And the way that it's pronounced in Chinese, it's often associated with reunion and being together. And so that's kind of why they're favored during the Chinese New Year, because again, it's a celebration of being together with your family and friends. So we're also going to have the longevity noodles. So as you might figure out, it means longevity, a long life, but it also means happiness as well. So it symbolizes a wish for longevity. And again, their length and the unsevered preparation are also symbolic of the eater's life. So you want the longer the noodles, the better. And again, you want them uncut, either fried or served on a plate, or broiled and served in a bowl with their broth. We also have the good fortune fruit. So fullness and wealth. Again, we want abundance, not just in terms of money, but abundance in terms of the rest of life too. Happiness, family, health, those sorts of things. So some of the typical fruit that are eaten are tangerines and oranges. They're selected because they're round and they're kind of golden in color. And so again, this symbolizes fullness and wealth. And again, because of the way it sounds in Chinese when spoken, it's supposed to be lucky. And it's believed that when you eat and display tangerines in order, so again, someone not just even eating them, but displaying them in your house, that these are good because it also sounds like the words for success, for luck, for wealth as well. And then, yeah, so that's it. There's a lot of different foods that are typically eaten during the Chinese New Year. These are just 7 of the most common. And while a lot of these are served during New Year's Eve, which is this past Friday, February 12th, a lot of these are eaten anytime someone might have guests over. So with that said, I want to go into a quick recap of the elements that we have covered already, because again, this is the 5th and final night of the video series. And I just want to make sure I've given you all kind of a simple understanding at the very least of what each element represents and what are some signs and symptoms that are associated with it. So should they crop up, you might know what element to go back and treat or when to see an acupuncturist. So, we started off on Monday with the metal element. We say that the metal element has to do with the lungs and the large intestine. So when you ever have issues dealing with your respiratory system or even with your skin or your bowel movements, that can be a metal issue. The metal also has a lot to do with grief. So if you feel like someone's having some issues with grief or trouble moving on, or perhaps someone who moves on too quickly and doesn't take anything in, that's something that can deal with the metal element. Tuesday, we talked about the water element and how the water governs the kidneys and the bladder. Our kidneys and bladder just aren't the organs themselves like in Western medicine, but they also represent the endocrine system, our hormones, as well as our bones and the marrow. So if you do have any hormonal issues, think about those who are going through menopause. Treating the water can help. Also, if you have any bone issues, so bone issues, joint pain, like osteoporosis, scoliosis, those sorts of things, the water can help. The emotion of the water is fear. So someone who's maybe stuck or they feel paralyzed in life, treating the water is really good for that. And then Wednesday, we talked about the wood element, which is about moving forward and action, right? So the wood element is the liver and the gallbladder. So yes, we have the bile and the detoxing that the liver and gallbladder do in Western medicine. But in Chinese medicine, we say that the liver stores blood. So think of menstrual issues. Someone who has maybe painful periods, irregular periods, we might want to look at the wood element. If someone gets irritable or angry easily, or someone is stressed a whole lot, we want to look at their wood element. But in particular, we also want to look at someone's tendons and sinews. So if we think about someone who's always got really tight shoulders or really tight hamstrings, those sorts of things, we can look at their wood element and treat them that way. Last night, we talked about the fire element, which has 4 organs associated with it. It has the heart and small intestine, and also has the pericardium and something known as the Sanjiao or the triple heater. Again, as I said last night, there's not really a physical form or a correspondence to this in Western medicine, but these 4 organs, they make up the fire element. So when you have issues that are related to like your cardiovascular system, you can treat the fire element. Also, when you have issues that are maybe related to your speech, to tongue, those sorts of things, the fire, because we say the fire element opens into the tongue. But also when someone is having some mental emotional issues like anxiety, sadness, that sort of thing, we can look to the fire as well. And also the fire opens into the complexion. So if you have someone who has kind of a ruddy complexion, they might want to see what's going on with their fire element too. And then that leads us to tonight's element, the 5th and last element, the earth element. So some of the correspondences of the earth element is that it relates to late summer. Some say that the earth element is a transient season. So if you think of the time between winter and spring, like February, right now, it's not quite winter, not quite spring. That's kind of the transient time of year. The direction is center. It's thought to be center, while the others are the 4 directions. The color is yellow. The taste is sweet. The climate is dampness. The spleen and the stomach and the pancreas of Western medicine are the elements, or excuse me, the organs of the earth element. We say the earth element opens into the mouth and lips. And that's kind of how it starts to deal with digestion and the food that we talked about earlier. The emotion is worry. Singing is a sound of the earth element. We say the earth element governs food chi, holds blood, and influences body fluids. But then again, if you think about the spleen and the stomach, lots of body fluids, right, going on there. And again, it manifests in the lips. So if you have dry, cracked lips, something you might want to look about is the earth element. It houses the intellect, and it governs the fluid of saliva. So again, this is just some more correspondences of the earth element. Oh, and something else, the energy of the earth is thought to be that of stabilizing, so centering, which is definitely really interesting. So this is the part where I tell you a little bit about the element personality type. Again, remember, the purpose of these video talks is not so much about figuring out what type or what element you are, but when you have signs and symptoms that show up in your health, that you know what element they relate to, and therefore you can use that element to help. But again, I think it's always fun talking about personality types. So the earth person, and this is what is said, this is not me saying it, is thought to be someone who has a body structure that might be more round and fleshy. The earth type people are said to have a yellowish complexion, round faces, big heads, larger abdomen, small hands and feet with plenty of muscles. So the more curvaceous of the elements. They tend to have a sing-song voice. Others, however, say that the earth element will have a strong jaw and a sallow complexion. In terms of their personality, they tend to be grounded and practical. And when balanced, the earth is the glue that kind of binds all of these elements together. The earth is nurturing, supportive, relaxed, oriented, sociable, sympathetic, empathetic, considerate, agreeable, poised, and attentive. So because they're thought to be reliable and empathetic, they're thought to be good mediators. Think about Mother Earth or the mother type, like we talk about someone who's very motherly. This can often be used to describe the earth element type. And as nice as a balanced earth is, unbalanced or excess earth can show up as someone who frets and meddles, right? Who can be very clingy. They can be a bit overbearing because that groundedness transforms into unmovable and practical stubbornness as well. So when in balance, their temperament is calm. It can be great for helping people. They like to be involved and needed. They love to associate with other people, especially with family members. They seek harmony and togetherness. And they really like loyalty, security, and predictability. But again, sometimes that can go out of balance. And again, they can be kind of cloying and overbearing. They can kind of go back into their own minds, and their energy can become kind of stagnant and inert. So they kind of need to learn how to balance their devotion to relationships with solitude and self-expression. So going on a little bit more, before we talk about some of the ways the earth element can be out of balance, I just want to explain to you the role that the spleen and the stomach have in Chinese medicine as well as Western medicine. And that way you might be able to kind of follow along with how it shows up as out of balance, as well as follow along with a guest speaker that I'm going to be inviting on in just a few minutes, which I'm really excited to introduce you to. But first, let's talk about the spleen and what its main functions are. So it said that the spleen's main function is to assist the stomach's digestion by transporting and transforming food essences, absorbing the nourishment, from food, and separating the usable from the unusable part of food. Pretty standard with Western medicine. It's also said that the spleen is a central organ of production of qi from the food and drink that is ingested. This food qi of the spleen is also the basis for the formation of blood, which we learn takes place in the heart. And since the spleen is the central organ in the digestive process, it is often referred to as the granary official from whom the five tastes are derived. Remember, we said earlier that the earth element opens into the mouth and lips and governs the fluid of saliva, so hence its connection to taste, right? So said differently, in Chinese medicine, the spleen governs transformation and transportation. So this could show up as edema if that's not working properly. It controls the ascending of qi, or the going up of our energy and nutrients. It controls the blood. Hence, there could be menstrual or bruising or even easily bleeding problems if it's out of balance. It opens into the mouth and manifests in the lips. It controls our saliva. Again, this is going to go to all of the digestive issues that can show up with an out of balanced earth. It controls the raising of qi. Hence, if you have a weak earth element, we would say you could have prolapsed organs, those sorts of things, hemorrhoids. The spleen houses the intellect, focus, or memory issues if it's out of balance, and it's affected by worry or pensiveness. And pensiveness here includes too much thinking, brooding, hankering about the past, or obsessive thinking. So back to the spleen housing the intellect. This means that the spleen is responsible for the studying, memory, concentration, and focusing. So we often will say that students, particularly those in master's or doctorate program, will have what we call spleen qi deficiency because they're always studying, right? Their minds are always going. And this differs from the heart, which we talked about last night, which houses the mind, because that controls the memory of distant events, and the kidneys, which house the willpower, because that controls memories of recent events. So this is thinking in the here and now, focus. And then the stomach, going from the spleen to the stomach controls the receiving, the rotting and ripening of food, the transportation of food, the descending of qi, moving things downward, right? And is the origin of fluids. So we can say that the stomach receives food and drink, and it holds them down. So out of balance, you can have reflux, belching, vomiting, receiving, which has a relationship with the appetite. So if there's an issue with that, we can have a lack of appetite. And the stomach is called the great granary and the sea of food and drink. So I've already kind of gone over some of these, but again, when the earth is out of balance, it can be too much or too little. You can have a lot of digestive issues, so like GERD, reflux, belching, hiccups. We call that rebellious stomach qi. You can also have like diarrhea or constipation, IBS. You can also have chronic lethargy. Again, the earth element is great and it's centered, but again, if it's out of balance, it becomes inert. So often we can feel the tiredness, we can feel like a heaviness in our bodies, maybe like our muscles are actually heavy. If the spleen isn't controlling blood properly, we can notice that we get bruises really easy, we can bleed really easy. Maybe with periods that just tend to be very long and drawn out, we would want to check on the earth element. Some other things, it's easy for someone whose earth is out of balance to gain weight, or they might have some edema, particularly in the middle or lower portions of their body. And then more mental emotional, they might lack empathy. And then mentally, they might have a poor memory. They might have some fogginess they might feel in their head as well. So before I go more into how some of these things can be treated, I'm really excited because, as I just mentioned, I have a colleague that I want to bring on with you all. So in time for the earth element, I've got an expert who is going to talk to you about it instead of just listening to me blather on about it. So guys, if you could, I have a fellow colleague and acupuncturist, Courtney Wilhide, of Soul Garden Acupuncture just outside of Frederick, Maryland, that I would like to welcome on now.
Hi, Dr. Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Courtney. It's great to see you. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really well, thanks. I'm really excited to talk about the earth element with you. And
I'm really excited as well. So I guess we kind of started going over a little bit about it. But in my opinion, you are someone who knows a lot about it, both, I guess, in clinical experience. So if you don't mind, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the earth element and what you see in your clinical practice.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So you covered a lot of awesome topics, in regards to how it shows up clinically. So what I see most often is digestive issues like acid reflux, heartburn, nausea, especially bloating as well, and then as well as edema, which doesn't necessarily make you think about the digestive system, but it actually is such a big function of that spleen of holding things in place and also transforming and transporting the fluids. And a lot of times the edema shows up on the lower limbs when there's a spleen qi deficiency, I find. And so a lot of times when I'm working with patients in clinic, it's those are the main physical aspects of what I see most often, although you did touch on some other things like the prolapse, and that spleen qi deficiency, just the lethargy that people can get when they have this deficiency of spleen and stomach earth qi. And then, of course, there's lots of other aspects too that's on the mental, emotional levels that you did touch on as well. So if you would like me to go into that, I'd be happy to.
I would absolutely love for you to go into that. Again, I think yes, we've talked about some of the physical aspects, but the mental emotional is so important. And I think right now, particularly, we're at the end or maybe even the beginning or the middle, who knows, right, of the pandemic. And there's a lot of mental emotional issues that are starting to kind of come to the forefront. So I think if you don't mind maybe talking about some of the things that might show up in that for the earth element.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think it's great that you touched on the pandemic as sort of like this overarching theme, is that the earth, like you had said, is, the stomach. I like to think about the earth element in terms of what the organs actually do. So on the mental, emotional levels, it mirrors what the physical level is doing. And so, as you mentioned, with the students having really low spleen chi and stomach chi, because they're taking in all this information, for us with the pandemic, it's ever evolving. And then on top of the pandemic, we've had lots of other socio-political situations that are vying for our attention. And there's always something new coming out, new information always. And so our stomachs are exhausted. They are taking in all of this information and trying to process it. And so it really starts to weigh on us on a mental, emotional level, because it's almost as if we're breaking things down into really tiny pieces that's not always helpful for us mentally and emotionally. It's sort of we kind of grab onto something and then just process it and process it and process it. And that's what creates obsessive thinking and obsessive worry and concern, and can make us feel really apathetic at times. It's like, the one of the virtues of the earth is being sympathetic and empathetic. And when we're being asked to process all of this information and information that is hard to hear, it really starts to affect our earth big time, and making us feel lethargic and heavy and wanting to rest and nap a lot. And so, thinking about how we can support ourselves right now with the lens of Chinese medicine is really, really wonderful that we're talking about this, because it is something that we can all do for ourselves. I think later you're going to touch on some things, so I'll leave some of the acupressure stuff for you. But just thinking about how we can shift this over processing that we are being asked to do in so many arenas. Like, is that clear?
I think it's clear. I think, yeah, it's absolutely. And the fact that, yeah, just speaking to like the round and the round, like that, when one thinks of the earth element and one gets to kind of know about it, that really is the symbolic earth element, that just kind of going around and around in circles, and how that's showing up today. Like, I think you so fantastically stated. And I am going to come back to you because I do want to ask what you would say to these people who are coming in, right? Like, how would you encourage, or how would you craft their treatment? I do want to do some more, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say less inspiring treatment. So I do want to kind of give some people some clues about how they can do a little bit of acupressure and diet at home. But again, guys, I'm going to bring Courtney back on so we can get her take on how we can treat the earth element, particularly the more mental, emotional aspects that might be showing up. Mm-hmm. So with that said, I know, guys, in the past, we've gone on to talk about acupressure and acupuncture for the different elements. So with the earth element, again, you can use points along the spleen and the stomach meridians, because those are the organs of the earth element. You can also do some gliding cupping along the mid and lower back, massage of the abdomen. This really helps with digestion, getting things moving. So with acupressure points, there are a couple of acupressure points that I really love showing to people. The first one is spleen 6. It's about what we say is 3 sun above the medial malleolus bone on the inside leg. It's often very tender, so if you find it, this is kind of, it's my go-to point for the spleen. No, it's not the source point for the spleen channel, but it's kind of my go-to. We have another point, stomach 36. I call this point my chicken noodle soup point, because like chicken noodle soup is thought to be good for almost all ailments. I think it's good for almost all ailments as well. It's actually called leg 3 miles because it said if you puncture this point, you can walk another 3 miles regardless of what's going on. We also have stomach 25. It's what's called 2 sun lateral to the abdomen. Somewhat equivalent to about an inch. It's right on the rectus abdominis muscle line. So if you kind of are laying down and you push your head up, if your hands are to the side of your abdomen, you can feel where your muscle is. That's where stomach 25 is. This is like what's called the front moo point for the stomach. It's really great for digestion. So anytime anyone has like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, things just feel stagnant in the middle, I love this point. The earth point is so amazing. I use it so often because your digestive system, your gut, your microbiome is so important to the rest of your health. But that's probably another video that I've done a few additional points. Another one being spleen 9. So for people who are having a lot of issues with like edema or phlegm or mucus, again, whether it's showing up as edema, maybe it's showing up as a lot of congestion, or maybe it's showing up like whether that congestion is like in their nasal or sinus systems, or maybe it's in their lower abdomen. Sometimes people with fertility, we say like the uterus can be a little congested. So think of like PCOS, that sort of thing. Spleen 9, it helps to what we call transform dampness. And then also CV17, again, this is not a point that's on the spleen or the stomach. And I've brought this point up when I talked about the metal element and the heart element, the metal or the fire. Because of its location, it's amazing at helping the lungs and the heart in the middle of the chest. But because of its location, right by our esophagus, right, which is part of the digestive system, if you have any rebellious stomach chi symptoms like hiccups or belching or nausea and vomiting, this is a really great point to help everything go the right direction. I just want to kind of show you, if you were to do cupping on the mid back, over here you see something called bladder 17, 20, and 21. This is the diaphragm, stomach, spleen and stomach points. So you can do cupping along that. It really helps to get things moving. You can also do massage on the abdomen if someone has like constipation or they're prone to like a lot of bloating and stagnation issues. That's really good. And then this last picture, I just threw it in of Justin Bieber. I just thought it's funny that he got it on his chest. He might not have digestive issues, but some people will actually do cupping to help with muscular development and cellulite and removal. It really can help. So someone who's had childbirth and maybe they rip the lower abdominal muscle, maybe someone wants to get the upper abdominal muscles a little more tight, you can do that as well. That, again, is a different video. Now, in terms of treating the earth with diet, so the color of the earth we talked about earlier is yellow, so incorporating a lot of yellow foods into the diet. But of course, this means more like the brown, even the orange-like foods. So like carrots, gourds, if we think of pumpkins, mushrooms, that sort of thing are really good for the earth. It's also really important that when you have an earth issue, you want to eat mainly warm and likely cooked foods over raw foods. It's just easier on the stomach to digest. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, I don't understand why I have all these issues, particularly digestive issues, because I'm eating so healthy. I'm eating my salads and my shakes all the time. But it's like, that's great. And if you've got something going on, your body needs to be able to expend the least amount of energy as possible on the digestion and breakdown of food. So by eating warm and lightly cooked foods, it's really easy for the body to extract the nutrients and utilize them, right? Versus eating something that's cold and raw, kind of compacted, the body has to expend more energy to break it down. It's also really good if you've got some earth imbalance, particularly digestive, that you sip room temperature water throughout the day versus gulping it down, and that you try not to drink during your meals, but maybe before or after. So again, dietary recommendations, it's about the foods you include into your everyday diet. It's about how they are cooked or prepared, but it's also about kind of good eating etiquette, like when you eat, how you eat. Try not to eat on the run. Try not to be looking or scrolling through your phone when you're eating, those sorts of things, especially if you have digestive issues or maybe you're suffering from fogginess. I mean, you need to focus on eating and letting your body eat as easily as possible, get those nutrients and utilize them, right? And then in terms of lifestyle recommendations, some things we talked about, again, gentle movement. Sometimes the earth element can get inert, right? It's prone to kind of dampness and obesity. So we just want gentle movement that helps things to move in. Deep belly breathing. Again, we just want to get everything flowing throughout the whole body, down into the lower abdomen. Yeah, and also something else important too is just making sure you spend time with family and friends. But some of these lifestyle recommendations, I think that maybe Courtney might be able to say a little bit better than me. So I want to bring Courtney back out and see if she has some recommendations for treating the earth element when it's out of balance, especially if it's a more like a mental, emotional issue kind of going on.
Sure. So you had some really excellent points about the points that you listed for acupressure are fantastic. And if it's okay, I have one to add.
Yes, please.
I have a couple to add, if that's okay.
Yes.
I do a lot of abdominals massage on children and infants. A lot of times babies have digestive issues, milk allergies through mama, and also just constipation, unfortunately, is a big thing for little ones. And so just doing a really nice, gentle clockwise massage. So if someone's doing it on themselves, they can actually rub their stomach in a circle in a clockwise motion, and that follows the track of the intestines, which helps support digestion and also elimination. So when you talked about stomach 25, that's like perfect. That's the whole arena that I like to massage. And then also there's a point that's good for mental emotional support, which is called head tide on the stomach channel. It's right up here at the top that I like to massage. That one is great when your head is literally tied in knots, like too many thoughts, too many, just like you've got a bundle of like fog in your mind. Like it really helps open up the channel and let the chi descend, because the natural movement of the stomach chi is down, not
Right.
up, not with the nausea and the obsessive thinking and things like that. There's also, I was thinking about CV12, which is just a little bit, maybe put your palm at the base of your sternum. It's about at the base of where your palm would hit, so halfway between your sternum and your belly button. And that's the master point for the stomach and spleen, and really supports digestion. So even if you just rubbed your belly, like your upper belly, like that would be really helpful, I think. And then another thing I wanted to add was the room temperature. Like a lot, like you said, with people, they're like, I don't get it. I'm having my smoothie and I'm having, my salads and I'm raw vegan, no, dietary, restrictions aside. If you need to eat, leave it on the counter. Like I tell my patients, if you have to have your salad, if you have to have your smoothie, leave all the ingredients on the counter long before you make it, so it's at least room temperature. Because stomach and spleen makes chi, but if we have to expend extra chi to heat it up to digest it, then we're really, dipping into our reserves when we should really just be building upon them. And so, room temperature, like you said, or cooked, warmed, is always really highly recommended. And then one other thing before I launch into the mental, emotional aspects was that each of our organ systems have a peak time of day. And so it's really great to have your bigger meal between 7 and 9 a.m. because that's the peak time for the stomach. So the stomach is highly functioning during that time of day, and that is the best time to have your larger meal of the day, so that because your body is actually got everything that it needs in order to function optimally, to actually digest and process your meal. So that's more on the physical aspects, but with the mental, emotional aspects, I talked about that point up here called head tide. That's really good to help sort of untangle the thoughts. And what I'd love to talk about is something that I think will build upon everything that you've been talking about, Sarah, this week, which is using the elements to work together. And so with the earth element, when it's out of balance, we have these examples of like digestive issues and, excessive worry or super clingy or feeling like a sympathy reject. Like it also shows up as people that just don't want help, don't tell me what to do. Like I'm doing 50 million things, but I don't want anyone else to help me because, I'm strong enough. Like it's kind of like that.
I'm sure we don't know anyone like that, right?
Right. Totally guilty. Anyway, so when these things show up on the mental, emotional realm where we feel really really tied up and caught up in current events, or really tied up in, just these really obsessive circular thoughts, there's other elements that we can bring in to balance that out, actually. And that's how acupuncture works in a lot of ways, is we're looking for the imbalances and figuring out how do we shift and move around the chi so that it can actually like equalize. So we're not taking away from something that it needs. We're really just balancing everything out. It's like if you had a dinner party and you were pouring glasses of water for all of your friends, and you saw that some of the glasses had more, and you would just top them off, right? Even it out. And so two of the ways that I'd like to highlight to do this on a mental emotional level, if you find yourself feeling like overly worried, get to the point where it's like, how could I possibly help? I feel really helpless. I feel like totally lethargic. I just want to sit on the couch in my sweatpants and eat ice cream and cookies and all the sweet things, because Earth is the sweet flavor. Ways that you can support yourself is actually by calling in the fire element. And so on the mental emotional level, that would look like, watching a stand-up comedian on Netflix. Just like get your mind off of it and like laugh, like just really laugh, move some of that chi, raise it back up, right? Because the spleen is what raises chi, the stomach descends chi, right? So wanting to just raise the chi, raise our spirits, like shift our focus away from this thing that we're worrying about or obsessing over, or that heaviness that's sort of come over us. There's nothing better than a good laugh to like get that going. And also, I'm sure you also spoke in the fire element about intimacy and like how just having really good heart-to-heart conversations. And so sometimes when I feel really worried and caught up on something, like it really helps to call my best friend and just say like, this is what I'm dealing with. And sometimes just talking it out with her just makes it seem less overwhelming. And sometimes you even get to answer your own questions or concerns by doing that. And so I find that is like, that's calling in the fire element to really support and like clear some of that imbalance.
Right.
And then another way to do it is with the wood element, which is by getting really organized. The wood element has those aspects of planning and, execution of the plans. And so if you're really worried and you don't really know what to do, just get out a pen and paper, make a list, and just like, you'd be amazed at what you can come up with as a plan of action, or even just sometimes you can really set that worry down or that concern down when you have even just one thing to like do about it, instead of just like digesting it constantly like the stomach would, right? And so I think that would be those are a few different ways that I coach my patients when they have these mental emotional earth imbalances. As also, asking for help is in the fire realm too. It's like, when people don't want help, when they've got it but they don't got it, it's like who's the one person that you can really trust to say, let me delegate this one thing, and lighten my load.
Absolutely. I love the way you brought in how we can use other elements. That's something we haven't really talked about, but again, guys, when we have issues going on, yes, those signs and symptoms that show up might fall under one particular element, but we can treat the element and help treat some of those signs and symptoms, but we can also look at the other elements in the cycle. Because again, remember, they're a cycle, they're a circle, right? They're all connected. Again, I think Courtney talked about balance earlier. I would say, whenever I talk to my patients, I say the one word, if I only had one word to describe acupuncture, it would be balance, right? It's life is all about balance. And so what do you need a little bit more of? What do you need a little bit less of? And I just think that's a fantastic how you brought in the use of the fire, that we talked about last night, and then the wood we talked about Wednesday. Every element has great qualities. So it's, again, sometimes, they can go out of balance, but you've got different ways that you can help yourself. So with that, Courtney, I just want to say thank you so incredibly much for taking the time to join us this evening. You are honestly a plethora of information and knowledge. And guys, if you, like me, absolutely love what you heard, and the fact that she does all these other things as well in addition to acupuncture, if you would like to contact her, I guess, Courtney, what is the best way that someone can contact you?
Thanks for asking. I have an Instagram account, which is at Soul Garden Acupuncture. I also have a Facebook page, which is just Soul Garden Acupuncture. And my website is, you guessed it, soulgardenacupuncture.com. But it lists all of my different services. So I'm an acupuncturist, I'm a Reiki master teacher and healer, and a certified intuitive as well. So I have a lot of other things besides Chinese medicine in my tool belt. And so if you're interested in asking any more questions about the earth element or any other services, you can find me in any of those places. I am, let's see, what's the word? I'm a business of one. So you're always going to get me on the other end. So yeah, that's how you can get me. And thank you again, Sarah, for having me. It was really
Absolutely.
fun.
Of course, absolutely, guys. She's a business of one, but she's also a wealth of information. So take her up. And with that, I just want to say, again, thank you guys so much for joining me. I know it's been 5 nights in a row. We've gone over a whole lot of different things. But before you start dropping off, I do want to see who's the winner for tonight. Tonight's prize has a lot to do with digestion. So we're going to be sending out some ginger chews. But to switch it up, instead of ginger tea, I've got peppermint tea, which is really great for the digestive system as well, if you've got any nausea. And then I've also got ginger oil. So this oil is something that you can use to what's called a carrier oil. So you can put it in your regular body lotion like a jojoba, argan, or shea butter. And ginger oil is really good at moving. It's really good at stimulating the lymphatic system. So remember, we talked about the earth, and you can kind of be prone to dampness and edema. If you've got any kind of swelling, edema, that sort of thing, dab a little ginger oil into your lotion, do some upward motions, and you can get things really invigorated and going. So with that said, we are going to go and see if we can't bring up that wheel and see who today's winner is. All right, Miss Mary Gwynn. Miss Mary Gwynn is the winner for this evening. I will reach out to you to make sure that you get that prize. And with that said, we are coming to a close. I know tonight was a little bit longer than usual, but again, it's the last night. I really wanted to make sure I was able to get out as much information as possible. I am hoping that as much as this may have been confusing because we're trying to take Chinese medicine theory and equate it to Western medicine theory, that you were able to get some little bits and pieces that you can find applicable. Again, just a reminder that each of the elements has different signs and symptoms that tend to show up when it's out of balance, and you can use that element to treat those signs and symptoms. Like tonight, if you have digestive issues, if you have a lot of focus or memory or concentration issues, you can treat the earth through acupuncture and acupressure, as well as through your diet, not just what you're eating, but how you're eating. The massage, like Courtney was saying earlier, as well as connecting with family and friends, which is both an earth and a fire element thing. And then again, like she was saying, you can use some of the tips and tricks with the other elements to help kind of treat what's going on too, particularly when it comes to mental, emotional issues. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love taking questions. I love talking shop. I really do love talking about acupuncture. And please look forward. I do hope to have some more videos out talking about particular conditions and really getting into how to treat those conditions, both at home and with a licensed acupuncturist. And again, for my 2 guests who came on, Dr. Kachina Smith and Courtney Wilhide, please don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. They really are a wealth of knowledge. And with that, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for checking in. Thank you for completing our 5 days New Year's Wellness Challenge. I look forward to talking to you shortly.